We now move over. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging more pressure on Russia. He demands tougher sanctions to force diplomacy forward. This comes in response to the Russian missile and drone strikes in Kiev early this morning. The strike left 2 people dead and 7 injured. Several children are among those who are injured, with fires breaking out in residential buildings across multiple districts as drone debris rained down. Air defences intercepted at least 1 missile and 11 drones, but damage remains widespread. Ukraine responded with drone attacks on Moscow and surrounding regions. Russian officials say more than 140 airborne threats were shot down. Airports across the capital were shot down overnight for the 3rd night in a row. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping is due to start a 4-day visit to Russia on Wednesday for a high-stakes visit. He will meet President Vladimir Putin, and attend the Victory Day parade. The visit signals a deepening alliance amid growing tensions with the West. In another development, Moscow released a sharp diplomatic statement saying there's no reason to expect improved ties with Germany under Chancellor Friedrich Merz, criticising Berlin's stance on military aid to Ukraine. We are now joined by Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much for joining us. Adit, we have this 3-day ceasefire, proposed ceasefire by Vladimir Putin coming up. These strikes from capital to capital today, it's not looking too positive for that, is it?
No, it's not, especially with Steve Witkoff being there in Moscow. He's already had 3 meetings with Putin, and the results have yielded nothing so far. Nothing that could dissuade him from creating this absolute annihilation of Ukrainian cities. And especially the attacks that happened yesterday, they've basically targeted university buildings, which is a tad bit too much, one could argue. So going forward, I think clearly Zelensky is on the right path, where he's trying to provoke Trump with rhetorics like it's Mother Russia again versus the rest of the world kind of a narrative. And he's trying to paint a picture that, after Putin's done with us, very well he could go for one of the NATO countries. So as a consequence, he is trying to ensure that Putin can be put under pressure by Trump to come back to the table, onto the negotiating table, and complete the peace deal whereby the peace can be brought back to Europe.
Yes, and Adit, obviously we're seeing all these foreign leaders and diplomats and important figures fly to Moscow, certain ones anyway, for this Red Square parade. Do you think there's a possibility at the fact that as Russia is more on the world stage, Russia is more on show, that it will feel more of a need to abide by this proposed ceasefire? What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't think we've got any precedents where Russia can be trusted to that extent. One had thought that once the showdown between Zelensky and Trump was concluded, that President Putin would actually show some heart and come down to the negotiating table to finally talk about peace, which is much needed in Europe, and the consequences of which will be felt world over. But that has not happened. So at this point, we don't have any sort of precedents to go by. And he is a very temperamental and a diabolical man at the end of the day. We've seen that how he sort of engages with his own sort of opposition leaders within his own sort of country. Goes to point that he has a certain way of functioning, which is very hedonistic in certain ways. So I don't think that the world leaders coming to Moscow is going to yield any more results. I think it's all down to how President Trump sees this situation, and how he can sort of put pressure on Moscow to ensure that ceasefire can be maintained.
Adi, one final question before we move on. I was wondering how you're analysing the US stance currently. Obviously, it's been flip-flapping. We've obviously seen, we saw President Trump and President Zelensky in St. Peter's Basilica on the Pope's funeral, and then we saw a minerals deal being signed between the two. But then as you've said, we've seen Steve Witkoff in Moscow. Where does the US stand right now? It's also talking about withdrawing from negotiations, of course.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Trump initially got into that face-off with Zelensky, I think they were of the opinion that Russia can be brought onto the table to negotiate that peace. But 3 times Steve Witkoff's been there. He hasn't been able to extract much out of Moscow. He hasn't been able to get them to concede on their positions, on their extreme positions of wanting to capitulate, Kiev's complete political entities as such, and have complete control over Ukrainian politics. And that is something which is absolutely non-negotiable for the Ukrainian people. They are willing to negotiate, but not to the extent of giving up on their sovereignty to Mother Russia, and that's the sort of narrative that Ukrainians are sort of pressing on with.
Adok Kathari, thank you very much, but please stay with us as we move on. A major breakthrough in the Red Sea.